Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, your packed snapshot of the week's biggest business stories, their context, their relevance and impact. I'm Govinda Jetiraj. We're looking at two issues today. First up, we're going to be talking about retail inflation, which is down to 5.17%. The question we will be putting to Subhadra Rao, Chief Economist, Yes Bank, is what's next? Is an interest rate cut in the offing or should it be in the offing? The other question that we are asking today is full convertibility around the horizon now that two senior members of the government, or one Reserve Bank and one government, have spoken about it. Let's try and understand from two gentlemen, Satyajit Kanjilal, founder and CEO at ForexServe, and Anindya Banerjee, currency analyst at Kotak Securities, on whether or not we are ready for full convertibility or should we be even talking about it. Well, retail inflation is down to 5.17%. The big question now being asked is this the right precondition for a cut in interest rates? Let's find out from Subhadra Rao, Chief Economist at Yes Bank. Subhadra, thank you very much for speaking with us. So, first question, retail inflation is down. I understand that you've been spot on in that prediction. Tell us how.
Well, I think we had anticipated, while there was definitely some pressure on some aspects of the food, which was going to be an obvious outcome because of the inclement weather, particularly on perishables and so on. So there was a wider perception that food prices would really zoom up. While some part of it was true, but the other part of the story was there were a fair amount of non-perishable items which were showing some decline. Like, for example, we were seeing a decline in some oilseed components, sugar for that matter, cereals. So some of that staple cereals were seeing a decline. So there was a fair amount of an offset, which actually led to some, lesser than expected price impulses in food. The trend seemed to suggest that other items within the CPI, like textiles or clothing, that is, and pan, tobacco, intoxicants, etc., were on a declining trend, and which is exactly what happened. So by and large,
so if you were to look at the trend lines in terms of those that are advancing and those that are declining, how is it all adding up?
I think the only thing that we really need to be watchful from here on is, while I did say that this month of March did not see the fullest impact of bad weather on food prices, I think April, May, we will need to be watchful of food prices once again, because typically there's a seasonal uptick. The summer months have that pressure. Plus, I think a lot of that inclement weather related impact on food is not fully manifesting. So April, May, I would see some uptick in inflation. But let's not forget, 5.17 is a very, I would say, number which would not alarm anyone. More importantly, right until August, we have a huge base effect being favorable. So even if the momentum is somewhat, hardening, the headline inflation may not, completely
So on
show.
food prices, just to sort of pick you up on that, are you saying that the effect or the ill effect of the adverse monsoon conditions or adverse rain conditions that we've seen is not going to be more than a few points here and there?
It would not be significantly huge, because while definitely there has been a damage, and we have seen, at a high frequency price indicators on a mandi or a, wholesale grains, our sense is that if government remains proactive and augments supplies the way it did last monsoon season, so it's all boiling down to how government proactively manages the food economy. So while we definitely will see some price pressures, I don't think they're going to be, getting out of hand in so far as making inflation.
So if I were to conclude this part, it would be that retail inflation looks to be hovering around 5.1 to 5.34%.
I would think that we could see a 5.5 on an average for the year.
For the year, okay. So which is in keeping with larger sort of expectations and so on. So now the next question obviously is what should be done about this, or what should be done in response to this? First, question number one, interest rates.
Definitely, the fact that inflation is going to undershoot RBI's own trajectory or indicative number by almost 50 to 60 basis points, we would believe that there is some room for interest rate cuts. How much? I think at the outset I would like to say that 25 basis points is, we definitely feel should happen. The next 25 that we are still, building in our assumption would be contingent on, how durable the summer related price on food lingers. If it is not durable, if it just remains within the summer months, then definitely it's a positive news. And more importantly, the crude prices, we have seen a recent surge back. If crude remains around 60, I think it's a good news. Will give RBI that much more
So you're
room.
saying a 25 basis point reduction is what you were 25 to 50 basis
That's
point.
right.
But the Reserve Bank, when it did not change rates last time, it said that basically they were waiting for more transmission.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
So why are banks then, I mean, of course they've begun transmitting,
Yes.
and we've seen announcements even today by ICICI Bank, but what else remains to be done?
I would think for transmission, a lot of their liabilities need to get repriced at a lower level. Let's not forget the liabilities are booked, you know, well in advance. So I don't think your cost of funds have declined to that extent for the entire liability book. So it would be a matter of time. Until March, we had tight liquidity also. So overall money market rates were also very high. But definitely starting April, liquidity would be that much more comfortable, and to that extent we would see banks getting more on a broader basis willing to, you know, pass on the rate cuts. So I would think first quarter, that is the ongoing quarter, we could see a more systemic phenomenon of rate cuts beginning to happen.
Okay, so if I were to now take a step back and look at the economy as a whole, where are we going?
I think very clearly recovery is taking shape, is what I would like to say. We at the moment do have pockets of growth. You know, and
where are these
more
pockets?
importantly, I was coming to that, you know, it's very important to note what are these underlying factors of growth. Power outages were the single biggest factor for, you know, the manufacturing sector having shown a flat to negative growth in the past 2 years. The electricity has been very robust, I would say, backed by stronger and impressive output from coal. So I would think coal energy would form the basic enabler for rest of the growth. Unfortunately, consumer durables, if I were to look at, are still in a contraction zone. We are seeing basic industries which form the mining, electricity, still good. Capital goods will begin to play a good role as investment recovery takes shape, led by the government you know, sector, the public sector investments. So we are anticipating growth to get more broad-based, more visible starting the second half of the year, maybe end of second quarter. The recent data on the CMIE investment cycle shows a beginning signs of a pickup. I think that's a good news, because at the end of the day, government stimulus will have a very short shelf life. It cannot, given the consolidation framework. It has to be through, you know, investment-led story. At this point, public sector-led investment story would be good. All the lead indicators seem to be doing good.
Right. So you're saying underlying signals seem to suggest that the economy is on an uptick. If I were to, I mean, the question really is about looking back 6 months now, not just the last 1 month data and so on. And you're saying there are a few positive signs on the horizon, which is new investment intentions and an overall investment for climate for investment, or a climate for investment?
I would think that policy environment is getting better.
And an interest rate cut which may or may not happen.
You know, 3 things, I don't know, I think I may have shared it with you also maybe in the past, but the basic 3 fundamental factors are very much in favor for growth to get better. And what are those? That's a confluence of these 3 coming together simultaneously, more importantly, is easing interest rate cycle, benign commodity environment, and policy environment getting far better. Now these 3 fundamentally ought to support growth. So we do see for the current fiscal year, that is FY16, an uptake of growth somewhere between 50 to 80 basis points. So even if growth was downward revised in the new series to maybe 7.1 or 2, I would think somewhere between 7.5 to 8 would be the growth in FY16.
Okay, so let me put the question on the other side. And despite all of this, consumer demand in the way we would like to see it is not getting spurred. Why is that?
I think that would completely get related to the you know, economic activity getting much better on a broader basis. Job creation needs to be seen at a wider level. I don't think that has yet happened or begun to happen, but my sense is if we are seeing investment-led recovery, the next step is obviously, you know, the job markets are also going to grow, and that in turn would also you know, help the consumption story. Easing interest rate cycle will also help the consumption story, while I would say for the rural economy, structurally we are seeing some kind of headwinds. in terms of stimulus, in terms of rural wages having stabilized, or minimum support prices, you know, growing at a much lower pace. So there would be some headwinds on the rural consumption, but I think they're more sustainable, because unless and until you bring economic activity on the radar, back on radar, you're not going to see a sustainable growth. Stimulus cannot have a long-lasting role to play.
So last question. I mean, you know, India is being seen favorably now in a global investment play context. So why is that happening? I mean, just to sort of refresh our viewers' mind. And will that continue, and can we capitalize on that further? Because all of this, while we've been talking about internally, I'm saying let's look at it from a global point of view.
Absolutely. I think, Govind, this is actually India's Goldilocks moment or sweet spot, or whatever cliche you may want to use. But the fact of the matter is that 2013 to end of 2014 have been two very dramatically different scenarios for India. 2013, all the macro parameters were looking stressed. Current account deficit was heading at a very unsustainable level of 4 to 5%. Inflation was sticky at 9 to 10%. Growth had not shown momentum at all in terms of a pickup, and fiscal quality of fiscal adjustment was not so good. All of this has changed, and changed significantly, particularly on inflation side. I think from 9.5 to 10%, we are today talking of, you know, inflation at 5.5 to 6%.
Where we started,
That's where. So that was the first point, where confidence is beginning to emerge. Growth impulses are getting better, thanks to both the Reserve Bank of India's conducive, you know, steps, as also the government's policy steps. Mines and minerals, coals, insurance, all of these are terrific, strong, you know, positives for a bounce back in sentiment and eventually for growth. Our fiscal adjustment is tending to get better, towards more towards capital spending and less towards revenue spending. And so basically your inflation, growth, external accounts, your current account deficit is likely to be under 1%. So all these sound like music to the global investors, who at the end of the day want a stable environment, a more predictable environment. And to my mind, that is what has been the basic reason for India being absolutely as a top investor destination.
And you're saying everything's falling in line at this point, and you've been traveling a lot and meeting investors, so that's the sense you're getting.
That's the word.
That's the word, right? That's a good note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, Shubhada. We go in for a break on Policy Watch. We'll come back and ask that big question: is India ready for full convertibility? Joining us will be Satyajit Kanjilal, founder and CEO of ForexServe, and Anindya Banerjee, currency analyst at Kotak Securities. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Policy Watch. The big question we are asking is India, or should India head towards full convertibility of the rupee? The Governor Raghuram Rajan said that my hope is that we get to full convertibility in a short number of years. Subsequently, the Minister of State for Finance, Jayant Sinha, also talked about the need for full convertibility to deepen markets and become a leading player in the global economy. This is of course all conceptual. Let's try and understand where this could be going. I'm joined by Satyajit Kanjilal, founder and CEO of ForexServe, also joined by Anindya Banerjee, currency analyst at Kotak Securities, to try and understand this better. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Satyajit, let me begin with you. Right? So, are we convertible as a country today?
For all practical purposes, we are convertible.
Okay.
In the sense, I mean, putting it in layman terms, I mean, anybody wants to take money out of India, and he or she can. But again,
up to a limit.
Up to a limit. But then again, the issue is how much does a person want. So to that extent, I am saying that our country is convertible. But when we talk about capital convertibility, we are talking about you know, no barriers whatsoever, and there are no questions asked whatsoever. But I mean, that is something that the government possibly has to do at some point, but that point is what we are discussing really, rather than when it can happen, rather than if it should happen. All major countries have capital convertibility, so India is, you know, intending to be a major player on the global scenario. It will.
So is it a prerequisite, as the Minister of Finance seems to suggest?
I think it's part of the, you know, GATT agreement that your currency, it's a level playing field that we have to offer everybody else as well. So then people find it difficult to do business in India for many reasons, because of these sort of strictures that are there, you know. So obviously there has been, you know, we have received obviously complaints from many quarters who want to do business with India, and Mr. Modi is going head over heels to, you know, woo the international investor in India. So
and these are some of the nuts and bolts questions that they would ask.
So this is one of the things that is being spoken about. But on the other hand, China is not convertible either. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, Would we like to see a revisit of 1987 when we saw the LTFX issue where the global markets, especially in Asia, melted down?
Okay. So you're saying the concern that the concern of capital flight is something that should sort of make us think twice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that question will. Even in 2013, we saw that we had to scale back some of the things that we were doing at that point of time. And since then, we have seen it again being brought back in place.
Right.
So I think Anand can answer a few of your other questions.
Anand, how's your sense? I mean, what's your sense? I mean, when you talk to, let's say, people who are buying Indian currencies, or I mean, I'm talking about institutional, not retail. What's the sense? Do you feel constrained today because we don't have full convertibility?
It is a constraint. I would say the constraint which is coming in the market can be addressed even with a phased convertibility regime which we have in place.
So what's the constraint? I mean, why is there a constraint? Tell us.
See, we have to go back a bit to understand the entire constraint. Like for example, over the last few months, say almost a year since the new government has come into place, there's been a constant rhetoric about the need for bringing the capital from the domestic sources, from the international sources into the financial market, so that it can boost our capacity, investment capacity. Now, in order to do that, we need what is known as a BCD nexus, the bond currency derivative nexus. Now, this is again one of the steps which leads to more convertibility on the capital account. Now, so that is a step which we need in order to move.
Right.
So that kind of a progress towards a convertibility is something which is desirable from the economic standpoint as well.
Okay. Satyajit, will it deepen our markets?
Yes, it will surely deepen, and the inconsistencies there are, and the inefficiencies that there are in the market, because the Indian rupee is in the securities market, he can testify that on that, basically because we don't have a proper Indian deposit rate. That is some of the things that will happen, I think. The swap rates that are quoted are more or less derived. They are not real. So all those things will happen. India will become more efficient. There's a lot of losses in inefficiencies. But having said that, I think there are many inefficiencies in the economy itself, which I think this present government is first trying to sort out. Before the inefficiencies in the
of capital flows are resolved,
get sorted out by itself. But to answer your question, I think it is good, and I think the better way would be in a staggered approach. There should be degrees of convertibility which should increase. There should be a calibrated kind of a roadmap that is put forward to the
right. Okay, so let's come back to the broader question in a moment. Let me ask you, what's the sense of the rupee that you get today? I mean, where is it headed, and why is it where it is today?
You mean to see the
current level? Yeah, the current level. I mean, what does it reflect? Does it reflect something that's being managed efficiently or managed, or is it something that's floating as we think it is?
In fact, I would say that there has been a remarkable change in the way RBI has approached the currency regime over the last almost 36 months. Say pre-Rajan, we had almost RBI had taken a hands-off approach to markets, where only during stress would the RBI intervene. Now, since over the last say 24 months or say 18 months, we have seen the RBI intervene quite actively in the market, and it's just not to prevent depreciation or appreciation, it's on both the sides, which means they are trying to contain the volatility, which is important because it's an emerging market currency, and we have seen that say during the global market stress how volatile the currency can be, and volatility can breed illiquidity, which can hurt the exporters and the importers.
So you're saying that so you're saying that RBI has been proactive,
absolutely,
and therefore that shows that we may not be necessarily ready for full convertibility, or is that?
No, full convertibility, as I'm saying, is a phased progress, and we are already working towards it.
Right.
So we will see full convertibility, but over a long period of time. If we take the SS Tarapur report, which actually had
first talked about it, yes.
Which had actually laid out certain conditions which we first need to fulfill. First, it talked about a low fiscal deficit. Second, healthy financial system, means the bank should be actually healthy, the NPA should be low. Then it talked about low financial repression, which means your CRR, SLR should be low. And third, it talked about low inflation, which Dr. Rajan has constantly talked about for the health of the rupee. So once we achieve that, we can easily move towards a full convertibility, because right now all the countries who have full convertibility are developed markets, where economies are matured and are all where the financial system is robust.
Okay, so the other question, Satyajit, you know, one view has been, and it's a question as well, the shock approach. I mean, should we sort of administer a shock approach? You know, a sudden sort of, not a very sudden, but let's say with some degree of warning, you say that full convertibility from, let's say, Jan 1st, 2016, right? It could also shock the system into getting a lot of things right, which perhaps otherwise it would have moved slowly, isn't it?
Well, I don't think the markets will take that very badly, and I think rupee wouldn't hurt for that, you know, in the sense we have matured over the last several years, and we've seen that the RBI has had to buy over $60 billion the last 1.5 years. So it's more a supply side situation for India in terms of dollars than the other way around. And I think with the kind of positive signs we see, the dollar flows are going to be more. So if RBI doesn't support the dollar, the rupee could become very strong. That will be the worry for the people, I think, more than the rupee going bust. So I think RBI has actually been providing a flow for the, you know, if you're saying, the IMF is saying that India is going to be the fastest growing economy in 2016, so be it. 2016, January 1st, India becomes a convertible currency.
Right. So you're saying that whatever the case may be on the financial side, it's really the real economy that we should be worried about, concerned about, or looking at when we talk about full convertibility.
Absolutely. I mean, this is like the dog and that's like the tail. I mean, like if the dog is healthy, the tail will wag, otherwise it will not. So the question is how the real economy is going to do, and we live in a, you know, sort of a global world economy where everything is so interlinked, and you know, we are smiling right now because oil prices are $50. Give or take a few dollars. This conversation would have been totally
infructious
if it was at $110. I don't think Mr. Rajan would have spoken about capital convertibility. So these are all conditional, conditional to the environment that we live in and the situation that happens. And you know, the fact is that India is sort of showing the kind of growth rate which had been pent up due to so many other reasons in the last 2 years. And I think that pent-up energy is going to get released, and we are going to see that kind of progress that people are talking about. With IMF is also envisaging.
Right. Anindya, so from a currency flow point of view or a capital flow point of view, do you see a sort of easing up? Let's not talk about full convertibility, but let's say easing up further, helping that. I mean, you know, more flows because people feel more comfortable. They can, at least at a certain tier, they can come in and go out faster.
Absolutely, because
as FIIs can.
Yes, in fact, if we take the cue from the 100 Small Steps, which Dr. Rajan wrote way back in 2010, and since all the speeches, he has always talked about adopting a more liberal, say, a capital flow regime. So we would see opening up, but in a gradual manner, because we are also in a challenging global environment. So we will see more opening up on the debt side. We will see the limits getting relaxed. We will see, as you talked about, the GIFT, which means it's an offshore market which comes to India, and that is in fact a controlled way of a full convertibility. So we will be able to get a laboratory view of what it means to have.
So largely, I'm guessing a policy of gradualism that we've adopted in the past as well. So we're running out of time. So let me pose the question that we started with again, Satyajit. Are we ready for full convertibility, and if so, why not?
We are not ready.
If so, why, and if so, why not?
We are not ready yet, I would say, because it's by their own admission, RBI has spoken about a few number of years. A few could be 1 to 2, at least 2. So
short number of years.
So I think we are still coming out of certain mindsets and certain you know, ideologies and thinking, as well as systems which have to evolve to different you know, more interlinked global systems, and RBI has to be sure that it's when we go off the grid, that we are free floating, and we can take it easy, because we are talking about a vast majority of Indians you know, who would be affected by a sudden spurt in the rupee value, whichever way. Exporters could be badly hit, importers could be badly hit, which would affect oil prices, and the common man on the street could also be very badly affected.
Right.
So when we talk about a mature economy, we have to also talk about the vulnerability of the people also.
Right. But on the other hand, I'm saying if, you know, for instance, this government has been talking about a strong rupee. So this government is saying, okay, let's bat with the front foot. Let's, you know, look at it from a more confident positioning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now, one thing is for sure that it is part of the agreement that we have signed.
Right.
That is one part. Other part is that as things are improving, they're trying to take advantage of the situation and saying let it happen now sooner than later.
Okay. And the last word, what's your outlook on the rupee for the rest of the year?
I think
Not linked to the other question of full convertibility, but a general sense before we go.
I think India might see a slightly weaker rupee as we go, say down the year, for the simple reason that there is a high possibility that the US central bank would actually end up hiking rates, and which might make the dollar far more stronger against the emerging market currencies.
Right. So that's another factor that we should think about, at least during this year.
Absolutely.
In the short number of years that we're going to wait for, if at all, full convertibility. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We've run out of time on Policy Watch. We'll be back next week, same time. Thanks for watching.